Did what a lot of people did in 2007, 2008, 2009. I started a blog. I started writing. I started a blog called Ed the Sports Fan. You're talking to high level people. The best thing you could ever do is ask them to explain something to you like you are ignorant. And you break in, you need to go find two mentors. You need to find a professional development mentor, and you need to find someone who you
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Sporting Global podcast. And today we're here with Eddie, all the way from LA. How are you, Eddie?
I'm good, my brother. Things are great. I have good coffee in my hand. The sun is out. Sports are not driving me too crazy at the moment, so I have no complaints, and it's good to see you.
Good to see you too. And it must be kind of hectic for you these days with like the NBA finals. And of course, we had a little bit pre-talk before the podcast, and you were telling me you were like, so soaked up into the Euros as well. And tell me a little bit about how you're dealing with both the Euros and the finals at the same time.
Yeah, man. It's look, there's nothing greater than being able to wake up in the morning, make a little bit of coffee, have a little bacon and eggs, turn on the TV at 9 a.m. and boom, you've got, Spain and France and Italy and Denmark doing battle. I'm yelling at the TV at 9:15 in the morning for Raheem Sterling to, put it in the back of the net. And my wife is just looking at me crazy. And just being able to have that transition in the morning of awesome soccer. And then in the evening, boom, you're getting the NBA playoffs, the NBA finals with Giannis, Chris Paul, Devin Booker, DeAndre Ayton, Chris Middleton. Like, it's great. And the great thing about all of this, and the reason why we all got into the industry, is like I get to call the second half with the basketball. That's my day job. That's what I do for work. That's what I do for a living. Right. I don't really get to complain too much about my day to day. So I'm happy.
What a life, huh? What a life.
It is. so it's good, between that and we have even personally, me and my wife, we're expecting our first child in about 3 months, and so we're really excited about bringing a baby boy into the world. And we're getting grown, man. We were talking about being in class 5 years ago. You just think about how much things change, and look at you, man. You the startup king. You're out here being an ambassador for like-minded sport professionals who are trying to take over the world in sport. And I just tell you very directly, like, I'm proud of you. Keep doing the work, stay on the grind. You've got more glory ahead of you, and let us know how we can support you.
Likewise, Eddie, it really means a lot to me. And I guess what we kind of just have to get from you though, on the Euros, your final prediction.
Oh, okay. Finals for Euro. Okay. I'm picking England 3, Italy 1. I am a big Raheem Sterling and Bukayo Saka supporter. I'm an Arsenal fan, so I'm going to always root for Saka. So I think Saka and Sterling put one in the back of the net. I think Harry gets a PK. I think Italy's going to miss Spinazzola a bit too much down the flanks. I don't think Emerson can do anything with the pace of England, and it's going to be fun. I'm going to say that, and then of course Italy's going to win 3-1, and I'm going to look foolish, but I'm going on the record. I don't cover soccer, so I can give any hot take I want. So I'm going to England 3. It comes home. The trophy comes home. England 3, Italy 1.
Well, this technically episode will be posted after the finals, and now we'll see if you're going to be right. It's going to be awesome.
This is going to be great.
And for those of you that have been sitting here now already just exciting in their fingers, like ready to hear more about Eddie's story, and if you want to get key tips from leaders like Eddie, sharing their insights, sharing their tips, make sure to subscribe to this YouTube channel. You'll get free tips every week from global leaders in the sport industry, and that's always helpful when you're beginning your journey, trying to find your path, and that's what we try to do over here. And Eddie, I guess I want to go a little bit back to the beginning of how did your journey in the sport industry begin? Where does this love and passion for sports come from?
Yeah, it's the entry into sport is much like almost any fan of sports. My grandfather pretty much brainwashed me as a kid, and in America, there's a channel called TBS, and in TBS in the late 1980s, they would always play baseball in the afternoon and in the evening. And Turner Broadcast System TBS was based in Atlanta, Georgia, and that's also the home of the Atlanta Braves. So Atlanta Braves baseball games would be on all the time. And my grandfather would pull me over and make me watch Atlanta Braves baseball, tell me about the legend of Hank Aaron, have me watch, Dale Murphy and David Justice later on, Terry Pendleton, Ron Gant, these guys, play for a once terrible team that then went on to eventually have a dominant run in Major League Baseball. And so that's really where it started. And, like every kid, started playing sports, played in high school, played just a little bit of baseball in college. But, I've always just been a fan of sports. And I think the thing that's been great is like I've found an appreciation for more than just even traditional American sports. In America, soccer is not the dominant sport, but I give a lot of credit, frankly, to like video games. I mean, like being able to grow up and be able to play FIFA back in the day, and being able to experience the game, and then be able to make that connection point to the video game to the television screen, I think was really big. So but you fast forward a little bit. I tell people all the time I took a very non-traditional route to get into the sport industry. When I graduated from Langston University, a small historically Black college in Oklahoma back in 2005, I had a business degree. I started out as a corporate square. I worked in analytics and finance for a bank. And then I progressed to, I was selling cereal. That's a joke, but I worked for General Mills, and so I helped sell cereal and snacks. And really what I was doing was I was selling that business into grocery retailers. And so, I worked in client service and things like that. And then I went on to work for Nielsen, more data and analytics. So I was a bit of an analytics square client consultant for a long time. But how I broke in was I did what a lot of people did in 2007, 2008, 2009. I started a blog. I started writing. I started a blog called Ed the Sports Fan. You can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, anywhere else on the internet at Ed the Sports Fan. And I started a blog, and I just started to, get my hot takes off, share my opinion about things. And I found that I really had a passion for creating content, writing stories. And what was fascinating was at the time in which social media was starting to sprout, people were looking for content to consume. And what happened is people started to actually read my stuff and like my stuff. And that was fascinating to me, so much so that I started to get confidence into, well, maybe I can write for other publications. And so I started writing. I sent a pitch to Slam magazine, prominent basketball publication here in the States. And Slam was like the Ryan Nelson. He's actually a good friend of mine now. He was like, "Hey man, like I've read your stuff before. Like I'm a fan. Like, anytime you want to pitch something over here, you can." And that turned into being able to write in their magazine and getting print for the first time, which was great. And then from there, I started blogging more. I started freelancing for other publications, ESPN and True Hoop, Yahoo Sports, Bleacher Report, SB Nation, and everything like that. And I was doing all this while I had a full-time job. So I tell people like, I would get to work at like 7:30 in the morning, get a cup of coffee. I would go into my office, shut the door. And from about 7:30 to about 9, I was writing and blogging and doing all these other things before I started my day job. And it started to come to a point of complication when I remember Nike had reached out to me and said like, hey, like we want to invite creatives to come be a part of a Nike experience. At the time, it was called the World Basketball Festival. And this was in lead up to the Olympics
Yeah.
and USA basketball participating in the Olympics.
Sure.
And so they had this big experience at Madison Square Garden and Rucker Park. And, I had to tell my job like a week before. I was like, hey, I need to take 3 days off
Right.
and I had to lie. Like, I don't care now because I don't work for him. But like, I had to lie and say, like, hey, my mom's sick, and I went to Nike. I went to New York and had to, and I got to meet Kevin Durant. I got to, see Carmelo Anthony, Chris Paul, Dwayne Wade.
Yeah.
And that was like the first like light bulb moment.
Right.
And so shortly after that, I started my own media company, the Sports Fan Journal, where we set out to really create a publication and create a platform for aspiring writers of color, women, and millennials. And so we had this fantastic crop of young, talented voices, all very young, all from diverse backgrounds. I was so proud of the fact that we were able to put a lot of women on staff, and we started creating content under the Sports Fan Journal. And the fact that, we could look at some of our guys now, we look at, Jason Clinkscales, Justin Tinsley, Logan Murdoch, Alex Wong. We could see people that have gone on from TSFJ and now they're prominent voices on ESPN, or they're prominent voices for The Ringer or Yahoo Sports, Decider, like these different prominent brands.
Yeah.
Like they earn their stripes with us. And they and frankly, like they will say very directly, like, if I didn't get a chance to get these reps early, it would not have prepared me for this moment later. And so, fast forward a little bit, I actually quit my job. I was actually, I was like, okay, I'm going to quit my job. Yeah. I'm going to try to be a sports media professional. I was still writing a lot. I was covering the Golden State Warriors for SB Nation. Right. I have the Sports Fan Journal going, and I got really broke. I was in the Bay. This was like 2013, 2014. I got broke. And of all the places that I was able to get a job, one of my fraternity brothers said, hey man, we're hiring at Google. Would you be available? And I was like looking at my pocket and I was like, man, yes, I definitely would be available. So of all the places, I got a job at Google. It's like, what kind of luck is that? Right.
Yeah.
So I'm working at Google, and I was there for about a year and a half. And I remember I was on campus in Mountain View. And there was a gentleman there, and he was just like, man, I'm so happy to be here. Like, I don't ever want to leave. And it's like 4:00 in the afternoon. And I'm sitting here thinking, man, if you don't take yourself home, go out and go get a drink, leave the work. Like, this is work.
Yeah.
And this young man, he was just really like, no, man, like, this is where I want to be. I don't want to leave. I'm super happy and all this. And I realized I was being a killjoy.
Right.
And so that is the day I applied for, I signed up for an interest meeting for the University of San Francisco and their sport management program. And that was the day I decided I'm probably going to leave Google. And so that was the day I actually gave up my corporate square life. And I said, I'm going to do everything I can to try to make this sports media thing work. And so fast forward all the way to now, I finished the master USF program in 2016. I had a job with Fox Sports Digital, first with Yardbarker, then with Fox Sports here in LA. And then I was a social media manager for covering the UFC for Fox Sports. And then from there, I took a position with ESPN to work on their audience engagement team. And then for the last 2 years now, I've worked covering the NBA as an editor, now as a general editor. And so, like, I get to cover the sport. I love it. I went from blogging about the sport that I love the most, and doing it for free,
right,
to now being able to work on arguably the strongest sports media brand in the world, covering the sport that I love the most. And so, like, I really, like I said before, I really don't have any complaints about any of that whatsoever.
I mean, like, what a journey though, and I think it's like some key important lessons here as well. That sort of like the time that it took and the effort that you put down. From just starting like this as sort of like a side hustle, and sort of like,
Mm.
okay, I want to share my thoughts here, and then seeing, of course, the growth and the potential through it. But at the end of the day, it came down to sort of like your passion, your realization, and that, okay, what is important for me, like where do I fit in, and again, like, people need to know that things takes time, like it's a lot of hard work, a lot of dedication, and at the end of the day, you're gonna sit there and now, like you said, you're writing for one of the biggest brands, media sports brands, companies out there, and that's absolutely fantastic. And if we go a little bit into your role now, though, like as the general editor for ESPN NBA, and if you can sort of like map up a little bit, like what are some of your key responsibilities and tasks that you do at a daily basis? I guess right now, of course, like it's the main focus on the NBA finals, but at a general level, and then I guess if you could touch a little bit, like slightly on how the pandemic, and I guess like the stopping of games in the NBA was impacting your role at the time.
Yeah, so here's the thing about, so now I'm an editor for ESPN NBA, and you know, all that time I just talked about, I started blocking in 2008. And so, up until I joined ESPN, I had a solid 10-year run of
Yeah.
being a writer,
Right.
being a creative in the sense of like putting pen to paper, putting, digital words onto a doc. And, uh, the editor role is managing the writer, managing the story, managing the angle, managing the perspective,
Yeah.
and helping the writer land the plane in an efficient manner. And uh, it's a totally different process in the sense of you actually are you are trying to help someone. You're trying to give somebody the coloring book. I think that's the best way.
Right.
So, if I tell you like, hey, I want you to draw me a dragon breathing fire on a house,
Right.
and I just tell you to, and that's the story I want you to do. That's a wild story I just came up with, but I asked you to draw it, and I just give you a blank piece of paper. You know, you might draw a 20-foot dragon and a 2-foot house. You might, have them, on a mountain. You might come up with any type of imagery, and that might be good, but it might not be exactly what we are looking for to land. Now, if I give you a coloring book and I say like, here's the lines to draw within,
Yeah.
and by the way, here's a castle, and here's the dragon, trying to burn the castle down. And there's also a man trying to save a woman at the top of the castle, trying to get them to safety. And there's there's troops, there's soldiers trying to attack the dragon. Now we have a more complete picture of
Right.
what's happening, right? And that's because, and this is actually, I think, very important, not just thinking as an editor, thinking about process, right? So I'm a big believer in freedom of structure.
Mhm.
And freedom of structure, actually, Bomani Jones from ESPN gives a great TED talk about freedom of structure. I recommend everybody go and give it a watch. But the gist of it is that, for a long time, I've always been like one of the smartest dudes in the crew, in the class, and where I work. And I've frankly like never been someone who did a lot of studying, who took a lot of notes, used any type of guides or formats. Like I've always been really attuned on how to get to the end goal.
Sure.
And I think once you reach to a certain level and stuff gets a lot harder, that becomes impossible to do. You have to be able to give people a framework, because you'll drive yourself crazy. And if I can save my writer time and say, here's the framework, here's the outline, here are the 3 or 4 or 5 things I need you to hit.
Right.
What could take him 2 to 3 weeks could now be done maybe in 2 to 3 days.
Right.
And if there is thoroughness and explanation and what the expectations are, and why we are trying to achieve that objective,
Right.
then there's less confusion from the writer as far as what the expectations are. And so, but that's not any different than when you are managing someone or someone gives you a project, we were in class together. You know what happens when you have a team project and the outline is very loose. People don't have a defined set of roles or responsibilities and things that need to get done. People go out and do their own thing, and then they come back and it's a big, it's a cluster, it's a cluster bleed. And so that is my job on the day to day. And so, I'm fortunate I get to work with ESPN's talented writers covering the NBA, Andrew Lopez, Youngmi Suk, Ramona Shelburne, Brian Windhorst, just highly respected people who are super talented, put in a lot of work. But they lean on us to help sharpen angles, think creatively, think critically, and help them land a plane in an efficient manner. And it's a joy to be able to do that type of work. And you asked me, I think, about how things have changed. I believe about
how I guess the pandemic was impacted your role at the time in the stop of games.
Yeah, I mean, you're looking at it like I'm sitting at a desk at my house, and we definitely it was much easier for us to transition as editors to be able to work from home.
Right.
However, the two things that were a challenge were, one, the ability to communicate and the methodology in which we would communicate. So one, the way in which like you and I are communicating on Zoom now, it became, instead of, when I would be in the office, I would walk to your desk and be like, hey, how are you doing? I need help with this. Or, hey, what do you think about that? Now it is, I am tethered to Slack every day. I'm looking at I have two phones. I have two phones right now. Hi, that's my beautiful wife. And, but I'm tethered to my Slack all the time. Yeah. It is very common for people to just drop Zoom links in a DM on my Slack and say, like, let's hop into Zoom for 5 minutes so we can talk about things. And so recreating that interpersonal interaction was definitely a change. Number one. I would say the second thing is, and this does relate to the first to a degree, is our reporters were impacted heavily with the pandemic because I don't know how many people are listening have ever covered a sport and had locker room access or had media access. But when you have a media pass and you have access, you are allowed, after a game, you're allowed to go into designated areas to where the press conference is. And after a 10-minute cool down period for NBA games, you can go into the locker room and you can be in the hallways. And so what happens is, I'll just give an example of when I was covering the Golden State Warriors, because when I was covering the Warriors, this was about 2014, 15. Yeah. Warriors beat the Kings 120 to 100. Steph Curry goes for 40 points. Klay Thompson scores 30 points. And so the media, the reporters would all flock to Steph, all flock to Klay.
Right.
And what I would always do, I would go, one of the first people I did this with was Draymond Green. And Draymond Green was a rookie or a second-year player at the time. And nobody was talking to him. Yeah. Now, I was already very familiar with Draymond Green because of his time in college. Yeah. And I knew from his college days that he liked to talk. Now we all know Draymond Green likes to talk. It's very, very known. Yeah. He loves to talk. Yeah. And he is very knowledgeable about the game. So early on, I would go talk to Draymond by himself. And I would just go chop it up with him. Half the time, we wouldn't talk about basketball. If you want a tip on how to make actual relationships with people, not, high-level people, they could be athletes, execs, whatever, please believe they are human just like the rest of us. And if you ask them about watching The Bachelor or Game of Thrones or, anything else that is popular, like chances are they watch it too. And so half the time, me and Draymond would talk about hip hop. We would talk about sneakers, things like that. And then at the end, I would say something like, what were you guys doing? I'm gonna give y'all another tip.
Yeah.
Like when you are talking to high level people, the best thing you could ever do is ask them to explain something to you like you are ignorant. And so, a lot of times I would just ask Draymond, like, can you explain to me your thought process, or maybe what I should know about why this scheme, this tactic, this process you guys did seems so complicated. And you'll be surprised at how many people will go down and break down what they see, what they think, the why and how in which they do things.
Yeah.
A lot of people ask really poor questions, and it's not their fault. Talking to athletes, talking to high level people, it can be intimidating.
Yeah.
And so, but getting people to explain something in simple terms is a great way to understand process. And that was how I started to break bigger stories and do deeper dives, especially on the Warriors at that time. And
Yeah.
that was a lot of fun for me. And so, but now let me bring it all the way back. Reporters don't have the ability to do that. And so, what we've had to challenge our reporters to do is, hey man, like, you might have to text some of these writers, you might have to get on the phone, you've got to, like, finesse and politic, and make relations that aren't in a natural way. And so for our reporters that have really thrived, I think one thing that's been big for them is figuring out alternative relationships and alternative ways of getting the job done. So maybe it's not being able to go into the locker room, but making better relationships with the agent, making better relationships with family members, making better relationships with, people that maybe they're coaches in the past, things like that. And so, I actually think that it's helped evolve our storytelling to a degree. And I think and like anything else, I actually think the pandemic, while it's been absolutely terrible, in some ways it's made all of us a little more well-rounded. I mean, even this podcast, I'm guessing, probably would not have been formulated in the same way if it weren't for the pandemic, because I mean, we're on two different sides of the globe, and maybe the concept of this doesn't ever come to fruition. And so, I think that there's a lot of us have stretched themselves as a result.
I think it's a really valid point, and I wanted to like just touch upon like two final steps because we're starting to run out of time
We're good on
already.
time. You're good. You're good. Don't worry about it.
But I wanted to sort of like touch a little bit upon like again like your role as an editor, kind of like managing, overseeing, like fine tuning all these frameworks, which is obviously super key because sports are so fresh, right? Like it's things happening all the time. So I guess like the stories as well has to sort of like be in a very rapid pace. And I guess like that sort of framework and structure, how are you taking that with you now into your role as an adjunct professor at the USF Sport Management Program? And I guess like first of all, like how does it feel to be back?
Yeah, it's crazy. The thing I would say is, what is helpful in being an editor in thinking and planning ahead is that it allows me to actually be flexible in teaching a class at the University of San Francisco. So, to take a step back, like I had an opportunity to teach my first class with the University of San Francisco in their sport management program, which is a master's program. And so my class was focusing on digital strategy and sport media. And, the entire function of the class was about thinking on a higher level about how to thrive, not tactically, but strategically, as digital media continues to evolve, especially around sports. So thinking about how teams, players, brands, agencies leverage social media, the rise of video on demand platforms, thinking about influencer strategy, YouTube, things like that. And so, but not only how to break in and do quality work there, but the thing that I actually think is important is that we are striving to develop not people who can work in the industry, but people who can eventually be leaders in the industry. And so I think that's why it was important for me to really think about, okay, how do we leverage analytics and to make better decisions within digital media? How do we manage people? Like this is such, there are a lot of things happening in the media day in and day out, and one of the biggest failures I think a lot of our leaders have in the industry is like that sometimes they really struggle to manage people and relationships. They tend to think a little bit too much about the bottom dollar, the bottom line, and they fracture human relationships. They call it human resources for a reason, and I think sometimes businesses think a little bit too much about the resources, not enough about the humans involved. And so like these things all come into play, and so you start to think about my job, my day job, and teaching. It goes back to freedom of structure. It is, I would say if you talk to the kids that were in my class, it was probably very loose. They probably felt really, I wanted to make sure they felt really comfortable.
Yep.
When we were in class together, I think the best moments in class are always when you can have lively debate and discussion about a real topic.
Right.
And that was intentionally injected into the class. And so, I would make sure that we had framed talking points and angles to hit on that eventually would also help them with their assignments because they didn't even realize it, but they were talking through their homework assignment. And so, that's to me, like I thought that was really cool. And so, just the amount of feedback that I got from the students, I'm hopeful that I'll be able to teach a couple of classes a year going forward. It looks like that'll hopefully be the case. And I loved it, man. It was refreshing. I think as we get older in the industry, I mean, I'm 30, I'll be 38 this month.
Yeah.
And, one of the things that I think people struggle with is, they don't keep up with the times. And I'm saying that as someone who's 37, like I'm not old by any means, but even the perspectives of someone who is 27 is drastically different than me being 37. And it's healthy. We talk about diversity all the time, and most people tend to focus on diversity in regards to race or gender or religion.
Sure.
But age is just as vital from a diversity standpoint, which is why I tell everybody, when you break in, you need to go find two mentors. You need to find a professional development mentor, and you need to find someone who you can develop a bit more of a personal relationship, someone who more has life figured out a little bit more. And so having someone that can help you professionally get you where you want to go, and then also having those people that can help you stay centered and keep you really finding happiness. And then when you have that opportunity, you should also pay it forward and find someone and be available to mentor somebody else. So you receive mentorship up, and then you pass mentorship down. And so, and that's always something that's been really, I've always been really passionate about that part for sure. And I think that's just important for anybody who gets into this game, because this game it's a cold game, and it's tough to get into this industry. People pay the cool tax to get into this industry. People will do your job for free. People will do your job for less than what you make. People will try to hire folks for the job, and they'll lean on nepotism and cronyism to hire people that are not qualified for these roles. And this is before we start identifying the people that are Black, brown, women, people from who speak a different language, people who maybe have different belief systems. Like this game is very this game is tough to get into, and it's hard for people to stick around in. But there's a reason why we love it, and those who can persevere and find success, it's earned. And you know what you signed up for, and you got to know the entire picture when you get into it.
And I guess sort of like the sport management program as well at USF sort of like have that very underlying factor, right, of like connecting with the alumni and sort of like giving back, right? And and I said this probably like too many times already in too many podcasts with former USF students and professors, where I'm kind of like, it always surprised me a little bit as a Norwegian, like coming over to like a different country, a different place, and sort of like, reaching out to these USF, whether that's students or alumni, and sort of like getting that, I don't know, like that very openness, and that meant a lot for me. It did a lot for me as well, because I didn't always see that, in Norway, which is, maybe a little bit weird, but we're a little bit, interesting people sometimes. So, so it's kind of like had that openness and that sort of aspect of why this was important. And it also, as you said, it creates sort of like this culture of like, you want to give back, and you want to provide that. And I think a lot about that as well in terms of, Sporting Global as a company, where, we have a very, set vision where I want to have a very young core team that have like the ideas, the hardworking ethic, and are willing to do whatever it takes, right? But then you have to complement that with those people that have been in the industry for a long time, and that's the advisors, that's the, people that can drag you in or pull you in the right directions, because it's a new journey, and when you're trying to change something that has been done in a very similar way for a very, very long time, you have to break some barriers, and then you need those people that are, both new and forward thinking, and the ones that have known that structure and know also a little bit how to change that structure.
Yeah, I'm not sure how many folks in Norway are familiar with Jay-Z, but Jay-Z has this iconic line where he says, Hove did that, so hopefully you don't have to go through that. And the gist of that is, you know, you think about even your experience and think about how much you went through, and you think about the times you bumped your head, made mistakes, and you realize to anybody coming after you, you realize the things that could have been a lot easier, things that you spins your wheels on, that took way too much time to do something. And like I tell the students all the time, like, let me help save you time.
Yeah.
Let me save you some headaches. I've been there. Like, I've taken the non-traditional route. Like, that's the thing I always tell them, like, hey, um, there's, of all the people that I remember quotes from, of course, it would be someone like Matthew McConaughey. And he had this thing he said when he was, I think he was at the Oscars. And he said, the only person that I really look up to, that I care about how they think about me, is myself in 5 years, or myself 10 years from now.
Right.
And the point he was making is that, like, nobody can hold me more accountable than me. And so I know the expectations that I have for myself. And, if I could look at myself 5 years from now and feel like I met a standard that I have for myself, then that's the only person who can really judge me and hold me accountable. And I think similar to that, it is, especially when you are in a master's program, when you are coming out of college, especially when you're in your 20s.
Yeah.
I tell the students all the time too, when you're in your 20s are, let's just say this for what it is. When you're in your 20s, professionally, they're kind of terrible. It doesn't mean that people can't make money in their 20s. It doesn't mean people can't find professional success in their 20s. Right. But generally in your 20s, it is the hardest you're ever going to work for the littlest amount of money you're going to make. Yeah. And you are also going to be in a time in your life where you are still not sure who you are, what you believe in, and what your passions really are. Yeah. I did not make the decision to be in the field that I'm in now. I had a whole other career. Yeah. And I made a career change, and I took a pay cut to do it at the age of 30. And but I've never been as happy professionally until like probably about age 33 to now. Mm-hmm. It's the happiest I've ever been professionally. And it's funny, the more happy I've been professionally, the better my life outside of my profession has been better. I found I got married last year. We moved to LA. Life, like, I don't have nearly as much to complain about right now. My life is pretty decent. And so, having that opportunity to help people save time, mm-hmm. to help be more economically focused, being economic in their process, in their decision making,
Right.
is what I mean by economically. And so,
Sure.
that's what this podcast is also aiming to do, right? It is helping people save time. I'm probably taking way too much time by being long-winded and talking way too much. But that's just kind of what I do. So outside of me talking way too much, it's always good to have the opportunity to help people save time, get the answers, get the resources they need so they can go achieve their objective as quick as they can.
Yeah, and I guess like also in your role, as the professor now is this is more important than ever, and having that lessons with you of being through that journey and taking from your path of sort of like how do you know like explain to them in a sense where yes it's a challenging journey, but it's going to take time and you have to realize that things will change and that's fine. And like I always talk with like the students that we're presenting for, that we're talking for, like a lot of times, that at the end of the day it starts with you, like know yourself, what's your values, what is important for you in life. Because once you sort of like start mapping that out, it's a lot more easier to understanding, okay, what kind of organizations do I want to work for? What is important for me? Like, how does that fit into, wherever my path or journey is taking me? And then we kind of believe in this saying as well, where we're not going to be the one who tells you, okay, this is how you do it. This is your 5 tips. This is, I hate those like 5 killer tips for like a perfect resume on LinkedIn or whatever it is, right?
Right.
I'm like, sure, but that's why we share stories, because we want
Mhm.
people to find people that they can relate to, or stories they can relate to, whether that's like that specific job or role, or they are from the same country, or like that they see the scope and that they can, through that, understanding what they want, knowing more about themselves, getting key tips weekly, like I said, from leaders like you, and again, help them find their path. That's what
Yeah.
we try to do. And that's why I always say with academia as well, and you're kind of like in that now, where we're sort of like we have the same goal, which is sort of like helping the students succeed,
Hmm.
and that's a very key lesson. But talking a little bit about your I guess through your entrepreneurial journey, like as the founder and editor chief for the Sports Fan Journal, which you touched a little bit into the beginning. And I guess like what are some of those lessons, like the entrepreneurial lessons, I guess, that you've taken with you, obviously in your role with the ESPN, but also as the young professor at the
Yeah.
sport management program? How do you bring that out to the students?
Yeah. I actually think that more of our students and more young professionals in general should consistently take and like having an entrepreneurial mindset and entrepreneurial endeavors. They used to say, um, you should give everything to your job. You should focus solely on being the best you can within your job. And the term that they, say, don't half-ass it, right?
Right.
I don't know if I'm supposed to cuss on here or not, but I think I can let
We'll
that one slide.
we'll do like a beep. No, I'm just kidding.
Okay. But don't, but the thinking behind that is, if you truly want to be great at something, you can't be great if you're splitting your hairs trying to do two different things. And I think that was generally something that people really leaned on.
Yeah.
I think when we are thinking about the life and times of being in 2021, and the way the industry is, frankly, a lot of the jobs that, um, our students and young professionals in their 20s are doing, they are not really getting a full immersive experience into the things that they really want to do.
Mm-hmm.
But the challenge there is, hey man, rent is due on the first of the month. Hey man, my lady wants to go out to go have dinner, and we're going whether I like it or not. I gotta go send money back home because my grandmother's sick. Like, people have financial needs, and they have they like that's just the being life and times of being a human. Like, you gotta figure out how to make things work. And so I say all that to say, I think it actually benefits people to take on some entrepreneurial endeavors, so that they can start to think about more strategically the type of work that they do, the things that they're really passionate about, and to develop other skills.
Mm.
And so even with the Sports Fan Journal, I've never been, let me just say this right now. I don't have any formal journalism training.
Yeah.
I've never taken a journalism class. I've never taken a communications class. I did not go to school for journalism or anything like that. But when I started TSFJ in 2011, I was the editor-in-chief of 5 editors and at the time another 10 to 12 writers.
Yeah.
And since then we've had over 15 to 20 different editors and over 100 contributors to the TSFJ until we sold the company last year.
Right.
And I didn't even realize the type of skills I was developing for myself to potentially be able to take on the type of role that I have now. Now, am I saying that if you start your own, calling it what it was then, a blog, that, it evolved into a much bigger in scale digital publication. But am I saying that if you start a blog one day, will you one day be able to be an editor at, a major media publication? I'm not saying that. If you notice on my career path, I had to take different steps to get my foot in the door, right, to ultimately give myself the opportunity to have that position. However, a couple of things happened. One, before I had ever been given any managing responsibility, I managed a ton of people. I held people to timelines and deadlines. I managed resources. I mean, anybody understands who's ever started any type of business whatsoever, you don't have any money. And so you're constantly trying to think about how to pay for things, how to make things work. If something breaks, everybody's looking at you to fix it. And so problem solving, critical thinking, I was doing all that on my own. Yeah. Mind you, again, I was doing all this while I had a full-time job, right? And I had, a girlfriend or a wife now, right? And so, I see a lot of people that want to work in social media. I'm just going to use social media as an example. If you do not have a job in social media and you want a job in social media, the best thing you could ever do is you create your own social media content and thinking about creating your own digital media. It's never been easier to, so long as you have a computer. Yeah. And let me be clear, it's not assumptive that everyone will have a computer. A computer costs money. But if you can figure out how to get a computer and, you can get a subscription to Adobe for like $30 a month. So you can have access to Adobe Premiere and Photoshop. And then you can go on YouTube and you can look at tutorials on how to build content or how to design content. And you can start to develop those skills to create awesome social media content. And we've seen what happens when people, shoot things on their iPhone and, do a little editing, do a little designing. You can record an entire podcast on your phone. Right. You can shoot video content from your phone. It does not cost a lot of money to do these things, and you'll be surprised how far you can go with these things. And so I say all that to say, if you have a real interest to be in social media, and yet the job you have right now is that you are a barista at Starbucks, well, when your time is off at Starbucks and you really want to do it, you can still do it. And you should find ways not only to do it for yourself, but you'll be surprised, if you tell people hey, I do social media on the side, people will pay you to do it. There are people that need help with small business, with startups, people, a lot of people that do graphic design. I tell people all the time, if you've got a camera and you want to make some quick money, put out a note on your social media channels and say, hey, I'm doing logos and headshots, and I'm taking tips. And I've seen so many people that get a little white backdrop and tell people they're doing headshots and quick photo shoots, and people can come out and make $200, $300, $400 because they're just taking photos, getting people professional photos. Right. What do we learn about in class? Don't put any raggedy photos on your LinkedIn. Put a professional photo on your LinkedIn page, right? And so this is all really about the thing that we're really talking about here. You know, you were making fun of 5 killer tips to get a great resume to get hired or whatever.
Right.
The biggest lesson here is critical thinking and problem solving. Can you critically think about solving these situations? I'm going to tell you right now, one of the best ways I ever learned how to be a critical thinker is I played Final Fantasy video games, and I play video games all the time. I still play video. I don't know. I might not start work for another hour. I might play some FIFA when I get done. Yeah. But you think about the ways in which you critically think about the things you actually care about. Mm. And then, and I'll say this very directly, and I say this all the time to my students.
Right.
I remember when we were in cohort 42. Yeah. I remember when I was in cohort 41. There's people in cohort 41 and 42. I love them to death. I would never hire them. Yeah. I would never hire them. Right. And the reason I never hire them is because I saw how they worked. I saw their ability to critically think.
Right.
And if you can be a problem solver in 2021, it'll take you wherever you want to go.
Yeah.
And that is the thing that I realized, having to be a problem solver for my own business helped be a problem solver on the biggest stage. And a lot of folks just need reps in problem solving and being able to be a critical thinker and find success in that, so that they can build off that success to help get them where they got to go.
It's extremely important, and sort of like keep training that skill set as you talk about. And in order to do that, you have to, branch out. And I mean, like in today, you have so many resources available for free, essentially as well, where you can just, start fine-tuning that skills, and all you need, in many cases, is just your phone. Like we just started like recently, just like a live stream, just for fun. And I mean, like, we're literally just using my phone as a camera, and like, yes, I have a PC, of course, that I'm using anyways for work, but I mean, like, it's not a lot of stuff you do, and I think you need in order to make things, to start things. And I think, like, just that, knowing that, if you have the interest and the passion to do it, it's not a lot you need to have in order to start. And that's very key, I think, for a lot of people to know, because people are always like, oh, I need that, or I need that, because they're looking at all these, creators or people that inspire them, that are, been working on this for like, 10, 15, maybe 20 years, and see like, but they have that, and they have that camera and that microphone, or whatever that is. And you're like, oh, but I can't afford that. And you're like, but they all started at zero. They all started at scratch. And we always say that too, like, Facebook started with 0 users, LinkedIn started with 0 users, so are we. But it takes time, and we're building our way up step by step, but it takes time, and you have to be, understanding that journey. And I think it's what you talked about a little bit earlier as well, where finding those, mentors, those, people around you to help you, guide you on that path, is going to be key. And I'm sure, you'll be that person for many people out there, and help them. And that's awesome.
I'm just trying to keep up with you, brother.
Well, you're too humble to nice it. But I wanted to sort of like come to a conclusion here. We've been touching upon a lot of different things, from what you're doing today, and I guess like your role with the finals and everything. But if you want to narrow it down to just like some, a few tips, for students out there, and of course you talk with students a lot of time, but kind of like that specifically wants to work for a sports media company one day, maybe, a big or a small, and I guess in many ways, like, how do you separate yourself and stand out in the crowd, and then you talked about, of course, the ability to critical think and being a problem solver, but, how do you get noticed, in a sense, and then when you're young?
Yeah, 5 killer tips to get a role in sports media. Yeah, here we go. I would say one of the first things is to consider going, finding the white space, right? And so, I'll never forget when I finally got my break to like actually get a big position within sports media. I was working at Yardbarker, which is it's a startup media brand under Fox Sports Digital.
Yeah.
And it was fine. It was a good place to go cut my teeth. And I had this awesome opportunity to do a college football tour with Fox Sports, and I got some good visibility. And they told me like, hey, we have a position open for social media covering basketball and football.
Yep.
And I was like, great. Hey, that's exactly what I want to do next.
Right.
And I interviewed with everybody, and they love me. Of course, who couldn't love me? Like, they love me. And they called me back like a couple weeks later, and they said, hey man, we loved you. We think you're awesome, but we're going to go in a different direction with who we're going to put into this position. And I was like, y'all don't love me that much then, clearly. But then they said, but we also have an open head count to cover the UFC. And so, if we go down the list, this is in 2017 of the list of sports that I like. I would say at the time UFC was somewhere in between like badminton and NASCAR or something. Like, I don't know, like that's probably being a little drastic, but like I would watch the UFC when my boys would have it on. Yeah. I wouldn't pay for a UFC pay-per-view. Like I wasn't that demo. I was familiar with it a little bit, but I was not by any means a fan. But I also knew that this was an opportunity to really get my foot in the door. Mm-hmm. And I remember they said, okay, well, we're going to call you and we're going to ask you some questions and blah, blah, blah. And so I'm like, okay, cool. So dude calls me back. His name is Josh, and he's actually running social at TNT now. And great dude at Turner, excuse me. And he says, hey man, I'm going to just put you on the spot with a little quiz. I'm like, a quiz? Uh-oh, what are you talking about? So he's like, I want to ask you who the current belt holders of the UFC are.
Right.
And I was like, oh, okay. Now, this is where being a millennial comes to your advantage. Because I remember, because I went out, because I was at home and my wife was working and it was loud. And so I went outside and it was quieter in my garage. Yep. And so I'm outside and I'm on the phone. And I don't know if people are listening. I don't know if they have video, but I'm putting I have the phone on my ear. So I put my phone on speakerphone. And while I'm talking to him, I Google who the current UFC champions are.
Right.
And so this man asked me, so who's the current UFC featherweight champion of the world? And I'm like, and now I'm scrolling, I'm typing rapidly. And I'm like, hey, man, Josh, come on, man. What are you talking about? Everybody knows who that is. That's a Max Holloway. Max Holloway is the current featherweight champ. He's like, oh man, very good, very good. I'm like, ooh, it is very good. So, and then he's like, who's the current UFC women's strawweight champion of the world? Right. And I remember now, mind you, I had never read this woman's name. I know who it is now. It's Joanna Jędrzejczyk. At the time, it was Joanna Jędrzejczyk. Yeah. And if you know anything about Joanna Jędrzejczyk, you know her last name is alphabet soup. It is a lot of letters that don't seem like they all go together. One time to my Polish brothers and sisters. So anyway, so I'm reading it. I've never said this woman's last name in my life.
Right.
But I had to play it off. I was like, Josh, come on, man. This is too easy. Like, that's Joanna. I just said her first name. I didn't even bother saying her last name. Yeah. And he was like, yeah, man, gotta love Joanna Champion. I was like, yeah. And I just was lying my ass off. And so, he asked me like one or two more questions, and he was like, hey, man, I'm really impressed, man. This is good. I feel good about this. I'll get back with you. 24 hours later, I had a job offer.
Awesome.
And I realized like I was scared because I realized like I knew I don't know anything about the UFC, but I trusted myself to be able to figure it out. And I went in there, and it was very apparent from day one they needed someone like me, because I went into that room, I went into those studios, and I was the only Black person in the building. I was one of the youngest people in the building.
Right.
Because I covered sports like the NBA, college football, baseball, soccer, and everybody in that group was very isolated.
Right.
So I had all the fresh ideas. I had all the fresh perspectives. I had knowledge of things that I knew would work elsewhere that they would never have considered trying on the UFC.
Right.
And I started finding immediate success because of it. And so I say all that to say, I know it's pretty long. Again, I told you I could be long-winded. My apologies. My
A
point
great point.
is, if you want to stand out, sometimes it is very important for you to go where others are not. And so, we have a lot of students here in California, and I'll see certain jobs, and I'll tell them like, hey, this job is in Atlanta, Georgia. You should consider it. It's like, man, I don't know, man. I can't leave California. So you wouldn't leave California to go chase your dreams? What are we talking about?
Right.
There's a job in Johannesburg, South Africa. Get a chance to work for Kaiser Chiefs soccer club in South Africa.
Right.
Man, I don't know if I could do that, man. That's far. I've never been to Africa before. You wouldn't go. What are you talking about? Like, you wouldn't go to Oslo. You wouldn't go to London. You wouldn't go to Seoul. You wouldn't go to Sydney. You wouldn't go to Austin, Texas. You wouldn't go to Chicago. Like, you wouldn't go to what are you talking about? Like,
Right.
not only, and oh man, I love the NBA. Well, here's a job covering the Vancouver Canucks in the NHL. I don't know anything about hockey, so like the job there, the work is the work, right? And so we talk about this at ESPN all the time. Being a good editor is all about the work of being an editor. Understanding what a good story is translates to any sport or topic that I'd ever work on.
Right.
Maybe there are nuances and specifics. If I went to finance, for example, yeah, there are probably some terminologies and some certain perspectives I need to understand. But a good story is a good story.
Yeah.
And I promise you, if you are, good at social media, if you are good at finance, if you are good at analytics, if you are good at marketing, if you are good at any of these things, but the only difference is, oh, this location is out of my comfort zone, or this sport is out of my comfort zone,
Right.
or, like at the end of the day, like those things are manageable. And I think a lot of times we probably close ourselves off to a lot of opportunities because of it. And I also understand it's not easy to be like, I'm going to leave San Francisco to go to Philadelphia
Right.
or Las Vegas, whatever. Like I get it. And not everybody can afford to do it.
Right.
And there's no shade if you cannot afford. And I'm not even talking about afford as in finances. I'm saying afford as in your responsibilities, right? One of the things I've probably been luckiest to have happen to me is that, I'm just using my own personal life here. I got married when I was 36 years old.
Yeah.
And I won't have my son will not be here until I'm 38. So I'm very old. You see all this gray hair in my face, but I did not have any responsibilities tugging me down to be able to chase opportunity.
Right.
And so, especially when we have kids in their 20s and early 30s, and I keep saying kids, when we have folks in their 20s and 30s who are not tethered down, the people who are not anchored to certain situations,
Right.
frankly, you just don't have nearly as much of an excuse.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean, and the other thing, if you fail, you can always go home.
Right.
I tell students all the time, like, failing is one of the best things you can do. The thing I did learn at Google is I don't really care if you succeed or fail, but do it quickly. That's the key part. Don't spin your wheels for 6 months failing, because now you're wasting everybody's time, money, and energy. If you're going to fail, do it quickly, and then let's iterate and let's problem solve on how we can make it better. Or if it keeps failing, then let's quit altogether and just move on to something else, right? And so I think that those are the actual tips to stand out, is to get some experiences, to challenge yourself to do some new and unique things. The other things that are going to help you stand out are being able to tell your own story, and being able to put your own spin on things. And those are the things that I found that can actually be successful. Like, not everybody's going to be able to get a job at Nike or ESPN or the LA Lakers day one. It's just not going to happen.
Yep.
But there are other ways and places where you can get opportunity and really develop some skills. And being able to develop some skills on somebody else's dime, I learned way more working at Fox Sports for 3 years, and I've learned so much now being 3 to 4 years in at ESPN, than I even did running my own sports media company, because I'm in the machine now.
Right.
So, whenever you can get an opportunity to get your foot in the door, even if you don't necessarily feel super comfortable, if you understand and you have a vision on where things can take you and thinking a couple of steps ahead into where your journey could go, then it's going to help you in the long run.
You can always learn about, other sports. You can always, like, people are soaking up knowledge every day, like there's always stuff to learn. And it comes down again to sort of like knowing yourself. Knowing yourself and figuring that out, and like you said, grabbing the opportunity, wherever that is, and having that is sort of like I always say like this open door policy or open mind policy, in a sense, where like personally, I was always like kind of said like, oh, I was going to be like a managing director one day for like a professional soccer team, like here in Norway or like in Europe, and I said that since I was like 16, but I kind of always said like, well, there might always come something up, like there might be something. And as you know, from back at USF, like I never saw myself as an entrepreneur or someone who was going to start my own company, but here we are. So, you never know what's going to happen, but having that open mind policy, and I think the advice you're giving, Eddie, is really great. It's something to, sit down, digest, think about, and for having people reflecting, about what they want in life, and understanding where that might take you. So I think that's perfect way actually to end the podcast. I don't know if you have any final remarks.
I mean, look, whenever you find a good job opportunity for me in Norway, let me know. I'm out there.
Absolutely.
It's funny, we'd actually been talking about taking a trip to up to Scandinavia, going to Oslo, and going up to Denmark. It's funny, we were talking about wanting to go to Copenhagen at some point. Right. And once the pandemic kind of calms down and everything, and so if and when we make it out that way, you're the first person I'm calling.
You're more than welcome to come visit me here in beautiful Molde. It's
Molde. I was like, okay, because Molde is on the other side. It's on the western side of Norway, right?
Yeah, correct. Yeah, I mean, like it's not too far, like 45 minutes on a flight from Oslo, and you're there. So it's
got it.
It's not like California and all this stuff where it takes you like 6 hours to drive and all this.
So Oslo is a 45-minute drive or 45-minute flight?
Flight. Yeah.
Flight. Got it. Is it actually possible to drive from where you are?
Yeah, you can totally drive it. What I would recommend before we're making this too much of a Norwegian podcast.
That's what I came to the podcast for. I came for all the Norway culture.
There you go. Yeah. So I mean, like, what I would recommend is you taking the train, from Oslo to Åndalsnes, and then either like we'll pick you up there or something, but then you get like essentially a most amazing view of the entire Norway. Like it's a train ride you should take, for sure. Because I always say to people too, if you go to Norway, please just promise you don't just be in Oslo. Because Oslo is still a city, like of course you can go a little bit outside to kind of like see it, but you have to go to the smaller places, because that's what Norway is. Norway is a lot of small places. Like my city is 25,000 people. That's normal Norway. So that's what you should experience when you're there. At least my recommendation.
Well, what I will say is that is not any different, and I'm glad you said that, because my father's side of the family, my father's family is all from Puerto Rico, and so everybody knows about going to San Juan. But I promise you, every time we fly into San Juan and we rent a car, and because driving from one end of the island to the other can take you 2.5 hours.
Right.
And so you can drive to so many parts of the island. And there's so many beautiful beaches in Puerto Rico that's not in San Juan. And San Juan is great. Don't get it twisted. Like, San Juan is amazing.
Yeah.
But when you can go to Bayamon or Ponce or Vieques, or, where my grandmother still lives in Vega Baja, like my grandmother in Vega Baja, she is a 15-minute walk from like one of the most beautiful beaches I've ever seen in my life. And, my grandmother's like, I walk here every day and just to get some exercise. And I'm like, this is amazing. So I 100% co-sign your recommendation, and I will hold you to that if and when we make that trip.
100%. And then you'll be the first person I visit when I'm back in LA in California.
We got you taken care of. We'll find the best watering hole possible and knock a few back.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Eddie. It was a pleasure having you here. Thanks once again for sharing your tips, your story and insight. And of course, for those of you that have been staying with us all the time, make sure to like the video, maybe write a comment on what is your biggest tip or like advice that you're working on right now, trying to like find that path. And then we'll maybe have Eddie looking into that as well.
I'll see what I can do. I make no promises, but I'll see what I can do.
Of course. Well, Eddie, we always have like this thing though where we finish up with some Norwegian. So I gotta learn you some Norwegian.
Okay, let's do it.
All right. So with every video we do, we always finish with "Vi snakkes," which means "see you later" in Norwegian.
Vi snakkes? Did I say that correctly?
Yeah, Vi snakkes. You got it. All right. Sweet. Thank you so much, Eddie. Enjoy your day, and we'll talk very soon.